once heard about a man who took great pride in his use of time. He thought he had reached in his adulthood the perfection of punctuality. That's a hard one to say. For every morning, his alarm would get up at go off at 6:30 a.m. He rose, shaved, showered, ate his breakfast, brushed his teeth, picked up his briefcase, got into his car, drove down to the dock, got on the ferry, went across to downtown, went to his office building, pushed the elevator, went up to the 7th floor, went into his office, opened his briefcase, sat down at 8 o'clock a.m. Never at 7:59 and never at 8:01. One morning, though, to his absolute horror, the alarm went off 15 minutes late. Panic-stricken, he rushed to his shower, burned himself. He nicked himself shaving. He gulped down his cornflakes, half-brushed his teeth, grabbed his briefcase, sped to the ferry landing. He jumped out of his car. He spied the ferry just a ways off, about 15 feet from shore. He said, "I think I can make it if I make a big jump." And he went and jumped off the dock and splash. Captain looked down into the water to make sure the man was all right. He threw him a life preserver and he said, "Son, that was quite a leap, but if you just waited another minute, the boat would have come to the dock and you could have gotten on. We were only 15 feet away." Patience is a virtue. But time is a strange thing, isn't it? We always seem to either have too much or too little. Seems stranger the more you think about it. How do you define what time is? We talk about wasting time, killing time, biding time, and there's one I hear at church all the time. "I'm sorry, Pastor Dave, but I didn't have time to do that." Or, "Gee, you know, Pastor, I meant to get to church, but I had so much going on." Have you ever listened to a clock? I got 2 in my room. I'm always afraid I'm going to wake up late for church, and so one goes off, and if that one doesn't, the other does. One of them ticks. It can be a fascinating experience. The tick reminds us of the very present moment. A moment that's never going to come again. Seconds pass into minutes, minutes pass into hours, hours pass into days, days pass into months, months pass into years. And we never know how much time we really have. The question of time intrigues me. How about you? The Bible was concerned with time in a big way. The biblical writers were more concerned with practical matters, though, with what you do with your time, how you live in it, how you use your time. Now, I realize that was kind of a depressing psalm. We like the Psalms because they're all cheery, right? But they're not all cheery. And they do talk about God's wrath too. But Psalm 90 is the one I picked today because it talks about time and the difference between God's time and our time. Verses 4 and 12, the author writes this. He says, "For 1,000 years in your sight, God's sight, are like just a day gone by, or like a watch in the night. Teach us to number our days aright, that we might gain a heart of wisdom." There are religions that are not concerned with time. The goal of some religions is to get outside of time. They believe that it's an endless cycle, that time just simply goes around and around, repeats itself. Believe in reincarnation, things like that. You just keep coming back and coming back. But for Christians, they believe that time is a straight line, that it moves forward. We're given just so much, though. And the decisions about what we do with our time determine our ultimate destiny. And that's what the psalmist was trying to tell us. That what you do matters. There's 2 words for time in the New Testament. First word I want to talk about is chronos. You get clock and calendar time from this. We get the words chronometer, chronology, chronic. As a matter of convenience, as I said, we break it into hours and days and years. But the feature of Chronos is that it's always moving forward. The hand on the clock, as I said, ticks on. And the problem with Chronos, and this is the one that we have either too much or too little of. For some people, the moving in the hands of the clock are frustrating. How are you going to get everything done in the course of a day? Yesterday was my son and future daughter-in-law's moving day. They were in great mood when they got up in the morning, but by the end of the day, every time I said something to Ryan, I got my head bit off. He's a nice kid. It's number 3 on the list of the most stressful things. Maybe Andy could tell us that, but it is a stressful thing, moving, and his wife. But there is sometimes just not enough time in a day. I thought of the ghost of Christmas Present. Talking to Ebenezer Scrooge, I've watched A Christmas Carol over 100 times by now. I have 4 versions at home. He says this: there is never enough time to do or say all the things that we would wish. The thing to do is to try to do all that we can in the time that we have. And he says, remember, Scrooge, time is short, and suddenly you're not there anymore. That's a sobering thought, isn't it? But that's true. The old saying says, none of us is going to get out of this life alive. And it's true. And so time matters. It matters now. It matters in the future. Psalm 90, verse 10 says, the length of our days is 70 years or 80 if we have strength, yet the span but trouble and sorrow, for they quickly pass away. Fortunately, many in our congregation have gotten more than 70 and 80 years out of life, and I expect to have many more years for them. That was back in those days. People didn't live quite as long as us. But how we spend our time matters to God. Ultimately, God's will is going to prevail. It's going to be done on earth as it is in heaven. So we're either going to be working with God's will or against it. And to go against it's kind of like going down a banister but having the splinters in all the wrong direction. You're going to get caught. Which brings us to the second kind of time in the Bible. There's Chronos, but there's also Kairos. I did take Greek when I was in seminary, so I'm showing off a little. While Chronos measures time by clock and calendar, Kairos is measured by opportunity. Jesus began his ministry with this statement. He says, the time is at hand. The kingdom of God is at hand. Repent. Believe in the gospel. Why are there times? Two kinds of time in the Bible? Because not all time is equal. Think about it. Look at the long stretches of Chronos time in your life. Times when life seemed to, as Shakespeare's Macbeth put it, move in its petty pace from day to day. But in comparison, there's times in life which are full of potential. Times of Kairos, times you're never going to forget, times of supreme happiness or profound sorrow, turning points in the road of life, when you've made a decision or fought a battle, lost a loved one, or found the one to love for life. These are Kairos times. These are the times that matter. There are moments when we say time stood still. That's why we need 2 words, because not all time is of equal value. Back to Shakespeare, built all of his tragedies around time, and when time was either joint or out of joint. In his play Julius Caesar, he wrote, there is a tide in the times, the affairs of men, which taken at the flood leads on to fortune, omitted at the voyage of their life is bound in shallows and miseries. This is time in the affairs of each of us, men and women, there is a time in each of our lives which taken at the flood either leads to good or bad. So as Christians, we believe the most important Kairos event in the world was Jesus Christ. When he came to save us, died on the cross for us. But we also believe that the most important Kairos time for each of us is when we make a decision for Christ. It might happen when you were baptized, especially if you're baptized as an adult. It might happen at confirmation, when you make a commitment to Christ. It might happen when you join a church. It might happen at communion, when you come forward. It might happen at any time. You could be at home. You could be anywhere. But when you make that decision, it will bring you the most fulfillment in life. I can only guarantee you that. Someone once said the purpose of life is to spend it on something that will outlast you. Actually, it was Tony Fields, the comedian who lost both legs to diabetes, but she kept working to help people throughout her life. And she said that's what she was taught, to spend your life on something that will outlast you. The only way I know to do this is to choose Christ first. John Wesley, the father of the United Methodist Church, the Methodist Church, he understood this. This is what Wesley said are your marching orders. Do all the good you can by all the means you can, and all the ways you can, and all the places you can, and all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as you ever can. I used to have that memorized, but I don't anymore. But I like it. In the 16th century, there was a sailor who returned home. He had spent his entire life sailing with Francis Drake. Somebody came up to him one day, saw how shabby he was and saw how beaten down he was, and he said to the man who had been a sailor, he says, "You don't have much to show for it, do you?" "No," the man said, "I haven't much. I've been cold, hungry, desperately frightened, often enough in my life, even shipwrecked, but I'm sure of one thing. I've been with the greatest captain that ever sailed the seas." And so it is for Christians. Being a Christian does not mean there will be no hardships, no dangers, no afflictions. They go with the territory. It doesn't necessarily make life easier. I wish it did. But in some ways it makes it harder because you have different commitments. You can't just live for yourself and kind of wrap yourself up. A person all wrapped up like a mummy isn't much use. But in the midst of life, we come to know times of kairos, times when depths of life break through. We get holy joy, it's called. My prayer for us this morning, especially as we come forward for communion, is that one day we can say, if we cannot say it now, I've been with the greatest captain that ever sailed the seas. If we let Christ be our captain, we will never go astray. I can guarantee you this too. You'll have the time of your life. Amen. If the ushers could wait upon us for our tithes and offerings.